Nazism is remembered primarily as a system of dictatorship, racial hatred, militarism, and genocide. But to grasp how this ideology captured a modern nation and reshaped Europe, one must look beyond political events and examine the mythological, symbolic, and occult ideas that wove themselves into its identity. Nazism did not emerge in a vacuum. It grew out of a Germany shattered by defeat in World War I, stripped of territory, crushed by reparations, and consumed by political chaos. Millions of people experienced poverty, humiliation, and fear. The Weimar Republic, Germany's fragile democratic experiment, struggled to survive revolutions, hyperinflation, and violent street battles. In this climate of despair, conspiracy theories, mysticism, and irrational explanations gained traction. Germans searched for meaning in the ruins, and many found it in nationalism fused with esotericism, in myths that promised ancient greatness and future redemption. Long before Hitler rose to power, the German-speaking world had a fascination with occultism and pseudo-historical speculation. The late 19th and early 20th centuries produced a wave of writers and thinkers who blended racial theory with mysticism. They claimed that the Aryan race descended from a lost northern civilization with supernatural qualities and spiritual superiority, Ariosophy, the occult doctrine preaching Aryan mystical destiny, spread through pamphlets and secret societies. In this environment, groups like the Thule Society emerged. The Thule Society was part political club, part neo-pagan lodge, part occult circle. It promoted the belief that Germans were the heirs of an ancient Nordic people with sacred wisdom, runic magic, and a divinely ordained mission. Members studied astrology, runology, mythology, and invented rituals based on a romanticized vision of the Germanic past. They saw Jews and other minorities as racial enemies, threatening this mythical destiny. Though the Thule Society was never a mass movement, it provided ideological fuel for those who would later shape Nazism. Hitler, who joined the German Workers' Party in 1919, a group founded partly from Thule intellectual circles, was aware of these ideas. He was not an occultist in the strict sense. He did not believe in fortune-telling or magic, and he often mocked superstition in private. Yet he understood myth as a political weapon. He recognized that people respond more powerfully to stories, symbols, and emotions than to statistics or reason. When he transformed the German Workers' Party into the National Socialist German Workers' Party, he emphasized symbolism as much as ideology. He adopted the swastika, an ancient Indo-European symbol, as the emblem of Aryan rebirth. He designed uniforms, flags, and rituals that evoked the imagery of a mystical brotherhood. He shaped his speeches not as policy explanations, but as dramatic narratives about betrayal, destiny, rebirth, and cosmic struggle. Throughout Mein Kampf, he described propaganda as an art of emotional manipulation, an art that should appeal to instinct, not intellect. The early Nazi movement operated almost like a cult, with Hitler as the charismatic leader who would restore Germany through willpower alone. He promised not just economic recovery, but spiritual regeneration. He spoke of Germany as a nation chosen by history, a people with a special mission to purify and expand. Many Germans, disillusioned by the failures of democracy, embraced this mythic vision. They accepted Hitler not as a politician, but as a prophetic figure sent by fate. This emotional foundation was crucial to the movement's success. Political programs can be debated and criticized. Myths cannot. Myths demand allegiance. As the Nazi Party expanded in the 1920s, Germany experienced new crises: mass unemployment, political extremism, and the global depression. Hitler positioned Nazism as both a political solution and a spiritual awakening. The party's rallies became spectacles of coordinated marching, torchlight, banners, music, and theatrical staging. These events were engineered to overwhelm the senses, to create unity through emotion. Leni Riefenstahl's films captured this dynamic. The leader descending from the sky, masses arranged in perfect geometric formations, symbols glowing under the light of thousands of torches. It was the aesthetic of a new religion, a faith created from racial mythology and absolute obedience. However, the most intense occult influence within Nazism came not from Hitler, but from Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS. Himmler viewed the SS as more than a security force. He saw it as the racial and spiritual vanguard of the Nazi movement. He believed Germans were direct descendants of ancient Nordic tribes who possessed mystical powers and moral purity. He sought to revive what he imagined as the ancient Germanic religion, complete with rituals, sacred symbols, and a warrior code. Himmler was fascinated by astrology, pagan traditions, reincarnation, and runic magic. He surrounded himself with occult advisors, most notably Karl Maria Willigut, who claimed to have mystical visions of prehistoric Germanic civilizations. Under Willigut's influence, Himmler adopted runes as SS insignia, designed ceremonies for SS weddings and funerals, and planned festivals that combined pseudo-pagan liturgy with Nazi ideology. Wewelsburg Castle became the center of this mystic project. Himmler intended it to be the spiritual heart of the SS, a place where rituals would be performed, where leaders would meditate on their racial mission, and where Nazi mythology would be institutionalized. Rooms were designed according to esoteric symbolism. The Black Sun mosaic in the central hall represented an invented cosmic source of Aryan power. A crypt beneath the castle was envisioned as a ceremonial chamber, where SS members would gather for rites of loyalty. Though much of this project remained unfinished during the war, it revealed how deeply Himmler intended to merge Nazism with a fabricated sacred tradition. Pseudoscience played a crucial role in transforming these myths into policy. The Ahnenerbe, an SS research institute, was established to prove the supposed historical superiority of the Aryan race. Its researchers conducted bizarre investigations, measuring skulls, traveling to Tibet to find lost Aryan tribes, studying medieval manuscripts for evidence of ancient Nordic wisdom, and staging archaeological digs meant to validate mythical narratives. Many of their findings were falsified or misinterpreted intentionally, but in the Nazi worldview, myth and science were not in conflict. Myth defined science. Anything that confirmed racial ideology was considered truth. Anything that contradicted it was dismissed as a conspiracy. This mixture of myth, occult symbolism, and pseudoscience paved the way for the regime's most horrific actions. The belief in Aryan superiority was not simply political rhetoric. It was framed as a cosmic duty. Jews, Roma, Slavs, disabled people, and others were dehumanized by being cast as enemies of destiny, obstacles to the sacred mission of racial purification. Hitler and his inner circle justified genocide as a necessary step toward restoring cosmic order. The Holocaust, though driven by political and racial ideology, was amplified by the mythic narrative that portrayed extermination as purification. This dangerous fusion of myth and power exemplified how irrational beliefs can become deadly when combined with political authority. To understand how a society as advanced as Germany embraced such ideas, one must consider the psychological dimension of Nazism. For many Germans, the mythology of racial destiny offered certainty during chaos. It provided identity, purpose, and belonging. It replaced the complexity of modern life with a simple narrative. We are the chosen, others are the enemy, and our leader is the instrument of fate. This worldview turned millions of ordinary people into willing participants in tyranny. Soldiers marched not only for their country, but for a mythic future. Citizens obeyed not only laws, but what they believed to be historical necessity. This psychological transformation was essential to the Nazi regime's stability. During the war, the mythic identity of Nazism became even more pronounced. Hitler compared the invasion of the Soviet Union to a crusade against subhuman forces. Himmler described SS missions as sacred battles. Propaganda portrayed German soldiers as heirs to ancient warriors defending the eternal soul of Europe. Even as the Reich collapsed, Hitler clung to apocalyptic visions, believing Germany must perish if it failed to fulfill its destiny. In the final days in the bunker, he still spoke of fate, betrayal, and mythical cycles. When the Third Reich was finally defeated in 1945, the world confronted not only the physical devastation of war, but the ideological wreckage of a movement that fused politics with myth. The Nuremberg trials revealed how deeply the occult and pseudo-scientific worldview had influenced Nazi policies. Documents showed SS rituals, Ahnenerbe expeditions, and the mystic obsession with racial purity. Yet after the war, many survivors and historians dismissed these aspects as fringe or irrelevant. Only decades later did researchers begin to understand how integral myth-making, symbolism, and occult ideas were to the Nazi worldview. Today, the Nazi fascination with the occult is often sensationalized or exaggerated in popular culture, but its real significance lies not in the supernatural, but in the psychological. The Nazis exploited the human desire for meaning, identity, and transcendence. They replaced reason with myth, science with pseudoscience, politics with religious fervor. They used symbols to stir emotion, rituals to create belonging, and fantasy to justify violence. The lesson is not that Nazism was driven by magic, but that myth can become a powerful political tool when wielded by a movement willing to distort history, manipulate fear, and promise destiny. The story of Nazism's occult dimension is a warning about the vulnerability of societies in crisis. When people lose trust in institutions, when economic despair and national humiliation take root, they may turn to myths dressed as truth. They may embrace leaders who promise destiny instead of democracy, purity instead of equality, vengeance instead of justice. Nazism shows how quickly a modern state can descend into barbarism when myths become policy, when symbols become commandments, and when fantasy replaces reality. It demonstrates how dangerous it is when political movements claim sacred authority and define entire groups of people as enemies of fate. In the end, the occult influence on Nazism was not a hidden curiosity. It was one of the ideological pillars that helped radicalize a nation. It shaped the aesthetics, rituals, and emotional appeal of the regime. It contributed to the creation of a political religion that demanded total obedience, and it played a role in legitimizing some of the most horrific crimes in human history. Understanding this dimension is not about indulging in sensationalism. It is about recognizing how ideas, even irrational ones, can shape reality when backed by power. The history of Nazism reminds us that myths can become weapons, and that the most dangerous ideologies are those that promise salvation while demanding sacrifice. By studying the intersection of Nazism and the occult, we confront not only the past but the enduring human susceptibility to mythic thinking and the perils of allowing fantasy to guide political life.